You think you know a woman. You don't. Not until you've seen her in her darkest days. When the world stops clapping, when her smile is just muscle memory, and the silence she sits in is louder than any scream. That's when her truth emerges. That's when you see what she's really made of. And let me tell you, her secrets, they aren't weak. They're war stories. You think you know a woman. You don't. Not until you've seen her in her darkest days, when the applause stops, when no one is watching, when her strength isn't put on display, but demanded in silence. That's when you meet the real her. When life strips away the filters, the pleasantries, the social expectations, and all that's left is her and her truth. And that truth, it's heavy, it's raw, it's not always pretty, but it is powerful. Because in those dark moments, when even she doubts her own reflection, she still finds the courage to rise. She doesn't need a crowd to validate her worth. Her survival becomes her proof. She breaks, but not in ways the world expects. Her breakdowns don't come with loud outbursts or dramatic scenes. They come in whispers, in the quiet tears she wipes before anyone notices, in the long breath she takes before stepping into a room full of expectations. She collapses in bathrooms, in closets, in her car after dropping off the kids or finishing a shift. She doesn't announce her pain. She swallows it. Because she knows that if she lets it all out, it might destroy the very life she's holding together. So she chooses to bend, not break. To cry and then carry on. And somehow, she manages to gather every shattered piece of herself and keep moving forward, flawed, but still standing. She doesn't get a day off from being strong. She doesn't get the luxury of falling apart when others need her. People lean on her without even asking how she's holding up. She's expected to function at full capacity while her own heart is running on empty. No one sees the weight she carries, emotional labor, invisible wounds, fears she can't voice. They only see results: the clean home, the polished smile, the job done right. They don't ask what it took to get there. And still, she gives. She stretches herself thin, making room for everyone else, until there's almost nothing left for her. And when she dares to take a moment for herself, guilt creeps in like a shadow, because society has convinced her that her needs are an inconvenience. There are nights she lies awake, wondering if anyone truly sees her, not the roles she plays, not the tasks she performs, but her, the woman behind the title, behind the mask. And in those moments, she questions everything. Am I enough? Is this all there is? Will anyone ever really understand what I go through? These questions haunt her because they don't have simple answers. But even in the face of that uncertainty, she doesn't quit. She doesn't let the questions consume her. Instead, she uses them as fuel, as a reason to dig deeper, to fight harder, to prove, if only to herself, that she is more than the pain she hides, that her identity isn't limited to what others see. Every day, she wears strength like a second skin, not because she wants to, but because she has to. The world doesn't hand her a safety net. It doesn't cushion her falls. So she becomes her own net, her own support system, her own hero. And it's not easy. There are days when she wants to disappear, to run away from all the responsibility, all the pressure. But she doesn't. She stays. She shows up for her children, her parents, her partner, her team, for everyone but herself. And yet somehow, in that silent commitment, she rediscovers her power. Because even when no one is clapping, even when no one is thanking her, she still gives everything she has. That's not weakness. That's not martyrdom. That's strength in its purest form. The world applauds her when she wins, but it's blind to the losses she endures to get there. The sleepless nights, the failed relationships, the silent sacrifices. They don't make headlines. They don't go viral. But they are the foundation of who she is. And she knows that. She holds those stories close, not for attention, but for survival. Because those losses taught her more than any win ever could. They taught her who she is when everything falls apart. They taught her how to keep going when no one's watching. And most of all, they taught her that real strength isn't loud. It's silent. It's the quiet decision to try again tomorrow, even when today broke her. She hides battles no one ever thinks to ask about. Everyone sees her presence, her performance, her polish. But they don't stop to wonder what's happening underneath. She walks into a room with her head high and her smile practiced, and the world assumes she's fine. Because that's what she's learned to project. That's what she's been conditioned to do. Keep it together. Don't make anyone uncomfortable with your truth. So, she wears the mask, perfectly fitted, perfectly timed, and no one notices the storm behind her eyes. They don't see the heartbreak, the anxiety, the exhaustion she carries, like invisible weights around her soul. She's been through moments that would cripple others, but she never let them show. The betrayal from someone she trusted, the silent breakdowns behind her strong facade, the emotional wounds that never quite closed. These are her secrets. Not because she wants to hide them, but because she's been taught that her pain makes others uncomfortable. That vulnerability is weakness. So she packages her trauma into silence and tucks it away behind her routines. She laughs at the right time, listens to others' problems, gives the best advice, and no one ever realizes that she's barely holding herself together. Because she's mastered the art of looking unbothered while bleeding inside. Sometimes she wakes up already tired, not because of the physical demands of the day, but because of the weight she's been carrying for years. She has memories she's never spoken of, choices she made to protect others that cost her parts of herself. She carries guilt for things that weren't her fault, shame for moments when she didn't fight back harder. These are the kinds of battles that don't leave bruises, but break you just the same. The kind that happen behind closed doors, in silence, in the quiet spaces where no one sees and no one asks. And so, she becomes her own counselor, her own refuge, her own healer. She's learned how to smile with heartbreak lodged in her chest. She's become a master of showing up, even when she feels invisible. She listens to others unburden themselves, but rarely opens up herself. Not because she doesn't want to, but because experience has taught her that people listen out of curiosity, not care. That vulnerability is often met with judgment, not compassion. So she stays silent. She keeps her truth buried beneath kindness and strength. It's easier that way. Safer. But not without cost. Every time she hides a part of herself, she loses a little more of her voice. Still, she does it, because it's what the world demands. She's been taught to be grateful even when she's hurting, to smile when disrespected, to stay calm when dismissed. She's learned to bite her tongue instead of speaking up, to shrink herself so others feel comfortable, to endure in silence because rocking the boat would mean being labeled too emotional or too dramatic. But inside, there's fire, there's rage. There's the quiet scream of a woman who knows she deserves more, but has been forced to settle for less. And even though she doesn't always let it out, it shapes her. It hardens her softness. It sharpens her instinct. And when she finally begins to speak, it won't be to ask for permission, It'll be to reclaim what was always hers. Her battles are not always seen, but they are deeply felt. Every moment of doubt she hides. Every time she was overlooked. Every word she swallowed to keep the peace. They form the chapters of a story no one ever reads, but that lives within her. And that story, it's powerful. It's the story of a woman who kept going when she had every reason to stop. Who carried others while carrying her own pain. Who endured in silence not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to hold her own world together without applause. Her hidden battles don't make her broken. They make her unstoppable. She's expected to stay soft in a world that rarely shows her the same courtesy. From the moment she learns to speak, she's taught to lower her voice. Be gentle. Be agreeable. Be likable. But what they really mean is, be small. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't speak too boldly. Don't ask for too much. And so she learns to fold herself into a version that makes others feel safe. But inside, she feels the tension. The constant pull between who she is and who the world wants her to be. And it's exhausting. Because no one tells her how to be soft and strong at the same time. No one teaches her how to protect her peace without being labeled difficult. She's forced to figure it out on her own, every single day. The double standards are everywhere. If she's nurturing, she's doing what's expected. If she sets boundaries, she's heartless. If she's emotional, she's irrational. If she's assertive, she's aggressive. There's no winning. She walks a tightrope of expectations, always balancing others' comfort above her own. She's asked to be emotionally available, but not too needy, ambitious but not intimidating, beautiful but not vain. And all of it creates this unspoken pressure to perform, to adjust, to shrink her true self into bite-sized pieces that others can handle. Yet when she dares to step out of that mold, when she chooses to be whole instead of convenient, suddenly she's too much. They don't prepare her for the backlash that comes when she chooses herself. The moment she says no, the moment she stops being available for everyone else's needs, the criticism begins. She's selfish, she's cold, she's changed. But no one asks why she had to change. No one sees the years she spent sacrificing her own needs, suppressing her dreams, staying silent for the sake of harmony. Choosing herself wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity, a last resort, a way to reclaim her voice before it disappeared altogether. And even though the world doesn't always applaud that decision, she knows it's the most honest thing she's ever done. Her softness is not a weakness. It's a conscious choice. Because the world has given her 1,000 reasons to go numb, to become bitter, to build walls so high that no one can reach her. And yet, she chooses love. She chooses empathy. She chooses to show up for people even after being let down. That's not weakness. That's power. The ability to remain kind in a world that's constantly trying to harden you is nothing short of revolutionary. But that choice comes with scars, with fatigue, with moments when she wonders if it's worth it. And still, she rises. Because her softness isn't naive, it's resilient. There are days when the pressure gets to her, when she feels like screaming just to hear her own voice, above the noise of everyone else's opinions. She questions her worth. She questions her instincts. Because the world around her keeps asking her to prove herself, over and over again. As if her effort isn't enough. As if her strength must be wrapped in a smile to be respected. And in those moments, she feels the anger swell. Not because she's weak, but because she's tired. Tired of being everything to everyone. Tired of being told how to exist. Tired of pretending that grace is the absence of struggle, when in reality, it's surviving while smiling through the storm. Still, she keeps showing up. Not because it's easy, but because she refuses to let the world define her worth. She's rewriting the rules in real time, learning how to be soft without being submissive, strong without being cold, and ambitious without apology. She's building her own version of womanhood, one that doesn't shrink to fit anyone's comfort. And though it's messy and uncertain and often lonely, it's real. It's hers. Because after all the expectations, the contradictions, the judgments, she's realized something vital. She was never meant to fit into a box. She was meant to break it. She carries shame that was never hers to begin with. From a young age, she's taught to feel responsible for how others perceive her. Her body, her voice, her ambition, all scrutinized. If she speaks up, she's loud. If she stays quiet, she's invisible. If she loves too deeply, she's needy. If she protects her heart, she's cold. And when something goes wrong, when she's hurt, disrespected, or violated, somehow the world still asks what she did, what she wore, where she was, why she didn't fight harder. And so, she begins to absorb the blame for things that were never hers to carry. Not because it's logical, but because it's learned, conditioned, expected. Over time, this invisible shame becomes a language she speaks fluently. It shapes the way she walks into rooms, the way she downplays her intelligence, the way she second guesses her instincts. She apologizes before speaking. She makes herself smaller to avoid being too much. And every time she does, a piece of her light dims. Not because she wants to be less, but because she's learned that being more often comes at a cost. She watches the world reward compliance and punish defiance. So she hides her fire behind polite smiles. Not because she's weak, but because she was taught that her strength should be kept in check. There are moments she looks in the mirror and doesn't fully recognize the woman staring back. Not because she's lost, but because she's been edited so many times by society's expectations that her reflection feels unfamiliar. She remembers times she wanted to scream, but chose silence. Times she wanted to walk away, but stayed. Times she knew the truth, but swallowed it because speaking out would make her the villain in someone else's story. And that's the thing. She's not just carrying her own emotions. She's carrying the burden of being likable, digestible, non-threatening. It's exhausting and deeply unfair. Even in her healing, the shame lingers. It shows up in the form of hesitation. She questions her worth, not because she doesn't know it, but because she's been taught to believe it only exists in relation to how others treat her. When someone disrespects her, she wonders what she did wrong. When someone leaves her, she wonders why she wasn't enough. These aren't just thoughts. They're emotional reflexes built over years of internalized blame. And as much as she fights it, they're hard to unlearn, because no one ever told her that sometimes people hurt you not because of who you are, but because of who they are. But here's what's quietly happening beneath the surface. She's starting to question the narrative. She's starting to see that not all shame belongs to her. That some of it was planted by a culture that thrives on silencing women, on breaking them into pieces, and calling it normal. She's starting to realize that healing doesn't just mean letting go of pain. It means giving back what was never hers to hold. That's not an easy process. It comes with grief, with anger, with moments where she feels everything at once. But still, she continues. Because now, the silence that once made her feel small is becoming a space where her real voice is being born. And with every step she takes, she begins to rebuild a version of herself untouched by that shame. One that doesn't apologize for existing. One that understands her worth isn't defined by anyone's opinion. She's no longer interested in being palatable. She's interested in being free. And that freedom starts with rejecting every lie that told her she was too loud, too bold, too damaged, too much. She is not too much. She was simply too real for a world that benefits from her silence. Now, she's done dimming her light to comfort others. The shame she once wore like a second skin, she's shedding it. One scar at a time. She learns to trust herself in a world that constantly teaches her not to. From the beginning, she's surrounded by voices louder than her own. Parents telling her what's best, teachers pointing to safer dreams, friends questioning her decisions, partners doubting her instincts. And after a while, it starts to get inside her. She starts to believe that maybe they know better. Maybe her intuition is flawed. Maybe playing it safe is wiser than trusting the fire in her gut. But deep down, there's a quiet knowing. A voice that's soft at first, almost drowned out by the noise around her. But it's there. It says, you know who you are. You've always known. And slowly, she starts to listen. Every time she chooses herself, she risks judgment. Not because she's wrong, but because people are uncomfortable when women don't seek permission. When she says no to something that doesn't align with her truth, she's labeled difficult. When she dares to want more, she's called ungrateful. The world has this unspoken rule: be obedient, be grateful, stay small. But she's learning that trusting herself means breaking those rules. It means disappointing people who only loved her when she was convenient. And that's not easy. That kind of self-trust comes with loneliness, with uncertainty, with the fear of getting it all wrong. But she walks that road anyway, because her freedom is worth more than anyone's approval. There were moments when she questioned everything, not just her choices, but her worth. Times when the world gaslit her into silence, made her feel foolish for believing in her own strength. She'd hear phrases like, "You're overthinking," "You're too sensitive," "Don't take it personally." And suddenly, her reality would feel unstable. But gaslighting doesn't work unless there's a seed of doubt. And she had to uproot that doubt. She had to dig deep into herself, past the fear, past the conditioning, past the noise, and ask, what do I believe? That question became her anchor. It grounded her when everything around her was designed to shake her confidence. Over time, she began to notice something powerful. The more she listened to herself, the more aligned her life became. Things that used to drain her started to fall away. Relationships that once felt like home started to reveal their cracks. And even though walking away from comfort was terrifying, she knew it was necessary. Trusting herself didn't mean she had all the answers. It meant she was finally willing to be the answer. No more waiting for validation. No more asking for directions to a life she knew how to build herself. She started saying yes to the unknown. Not because it was safe, but because it was hers. Of course, that kind of clarity doesn't come without resistance. People tried to pull her back into the box she escaped from. They told her she was changing. They were right. She was. She was shedding every version of herself that was built to please others. And not everyone could handle that. But instead of shrinking to make them comfortable, she expanded. She chose growth over familiarity, peace over performance, authenticity over acceptance. She began trusting her own timing, her own pace, her own process. And in that space, something beautiful happened. She stopped apologizing for being herself. The world still tries to test her. It still throws doubt in her path, hoping she'll crumble like she used to. But she's not that woman anymore. She remembers who she used to be, the one who second guessed every decision, who needed approval to breathe, who silenced herself to be liked. And now, when she stands tall, when she speaks her truth, when she takes up space, she does it not just for herself, but for every version of her that was once too scared to. Because trusting herself isn't just an act of courage, it's an act of rebellion. And she's never going back. She turns pain into purpose. Not overnight, not without struggle, but with relentless, quiet determination. When life hits her with heartbreak, betrayal, or loss, she doesn't crumble permanently. She bleeds, she aches, she questions everything, but she does not stay down. Somewhere in the midst of the chaos, she makes a decision. This will not be the end of her story. It may have broken her for a moment, but it will not define her. She picks up the shattered pieces, not with ease, but with intention. She doesn't hide the damage. She studies it. She learns from it. And eventually, she uses it as the foundation for something stronger. The pain she's endured becomes her raw material. Every tear, every sleepless night, every time she was underestimated or overlooked, all of it becomes fuel. While others may run from discomfort, she walks into it. She knows that pain, when faced, not avoided, can become power. But this transformation doesn't happen in public. It happens in silence, in solitude. She starts journaling her thoughts, pouring her soul into art. Starting that business she kept on the back burner, mentoring others who are where she once was. She builds meaning from the mess. Not because she wants to prove anything, but because her spirit demands growth. Because survival for her is no longer enough. There's a depth in her that wasn't there before. A depth that only pain can create. She no longer fears the dark corners of her mind because she's been there and she made it out. That experience gives her empathy, the kind that can't be taught. It gives her insight, wisdom, perspective. When she speaks now, people listen differently. There's a weight behind her words, a quiet authority that only comes from lived experience. Her voice isn't louder, but it's stronger, because it's rooted in truth. The kind of truth that only comes when you've been cracked wide open and had to rebuild from your core. What others see as scars, she sees as symbols. They are not flaws, they are evidence. Evidence that she survived, that she fought, that she refused to be defined by what happened to her. And as she embraces those scars, she stops hiding, she stops performing. She stops waiting for life to go back to what it was, because now she knows it never will. And that's okay. What was lost made room for what was needed. Her pain carved space inside her for strength, resilience, and clarity. And now that pain is her compass. It guides her. It reminds her of what matters. It keeps her focused on the mission that grew out of her suffering. She becomes a force not because life was kind to her, but because she refused to let it break her spirit. People see her thriving and think she was lucky or naturally strong, but they don't see the nights she questioned her existence. They don't see the moment she chose to rise while carrying the weight of her trauma. They don't know what it cost her to build that smile, that confidence, that vision. She didn't just move on, she transformed. Pain taught her discipline. It taught her boundaries. It taught her self-respect. She stopped chasing people who didn't value her and started building spaces where she didn't have to shrink. Now, everything she touches carries the imprint of her evolution. Her relationships, her career, her goals, all infused with intention. She doesn't waste time anymore, not on drama, not on people who drain her, not on fear. She has seen rock bottom. She's been through emotional hell, and if she could survive that, she knows she can survive anything. Her purpose isn't a title or a paycheck. It's the power to live with meaning, to inspire, to change lives simply by showing what's possible. That's what makes her unstoppable. Her pain was never the end. It was the beginning of everything real. And now, when you look at her, really look, you'll see it. The depth in her eyes, the steadiness in her voice, the grace in her strength. She is not who she used to be, because life demanded she evolve. She has turned her pain into wisdom, her silence into voice, her struggles into purpose. She no longer seeks validation from the world that once tried to break her. She walks with a fire that cannot be dimmed and a truth that cannot be denied. She is not a survivor. She is a creator. She creates meaning from pain, light from darkness, and strength from every moment she was told she couldn't. Her past no longer controls her. It fuels her. And she wears every scar not with shame, but with pride. Because every step, every choice, every battle she's fought has made her who she is today, bold, unbreakable, and finally, free. She doesn't need permission anymore. She doesn't need to be understood. She is no longer living for approval. She's living for herself, her life, her voice, her story. It's hers now, fully, fiercely, finally, and if that makes the world uncomfortable, so be it. She wasn't born to be liked. She was born to be legendary.